It started with a fingertip, not a headline, not a discovery announcement, just a fingertip brushing against stone, 10 meters below the surface, beneath the cloudy waters off Egypt's northern coast. The diver wasn't looking for a lost city. He was mapping a different site nearby. Routine work. Careful, methodical, until something caught his eye. Something solid, where there should have only been mud. He reached down, wiped away the silt, and there, under centuries of stillness, a carved symbol appeared. Greek letters, but older than anything that should have been here. He called for backup, and as the team cleared the surrounding area, more shapes began to emerge. Not just a stone, a wall. Not just a wall, the corner of a temple. That moment, quiet, unseen, half buried in salt and shadow, marked the beginning of one of the greatest underwater discoveries in modern archaeology. The city had a name. In Greek, they called it Heracleion. In Egyptian, it was Thonis. And for over 1,000 years, it had been forgotten. Not erased by war, not destroyed by fire, but swallowed, silently, by the sea. A city once called Heracleion. Before Alexandria, there was Heracleion. It stood at the mouth of the Nile, where river met sea, where Egypt met the world. A city of trade, of gods, of gold. A place where Greek merchants and Egyptian priests walked the same stone streets, where temples rose from the shore, their columns mirrored in the water below. This was Egypt's gateway to the Mediterranean. Long before Cleopatra, long before Caesar set foot on Egyptian soil, this was where ships came to pay tribute, where cargo was weighed and taxed, where names were registered, where people from Athens, Rhodes, Cyrene, and beyond brought olive oil, wine, silver, and news of the outside world. At its center stood the great temple of Amun-Gareb. It was here that pharaohs were crowned in secret, where rituals older than any empire were performed in silence, and where, according to legend, Heracles himself once stepped ashore, giving the city its Greek name, Heracleion. For centuries, it was unmatched, powerful, sacred. But then, it vanished. Not in a day, not in a single storm, but slowly, gradually, as if the sea had waited for the right moment. And when it came, it didn't leave a trace on the surface. The city was lost, and no one alive knew where to look. The day the sea took it back, it didn't happen like in the movies. There was no massive wave, no sudden scream, no single violent collapse. The sea took Heracleion the way the tide takes a sandcastle, bit by bit, quietly, patiently, without warning, and without mercy. The ground beneath the city had always been soft, layers of clay, silt, and waterlogged earth, pressed together by time, but never stable. For centuries it held until one day, it didn't. Historians call it liquefaction. The earth begins to move like liquid. Entire foundations shift, walls lean, columns fall. And what once was solid gives way beneath its own weight. It may have started with a tremor, or with nothing at all. But over time, the temples cracked. The markets tilted. The harbors vanished. Water rushed in, not like a flood, but like a claim, as if the Mediterranean had always been waiting. One by one, the buildings sank, not into chaos, but into silence. And by the time anyone realized what had happened, Heracleion was already gone. Not just lost, erased. Maps no longer showed its name. Scribes stopped writing about it. And for nearly 2,000 years, no one spoke of the city again. It became a myth, a whisper, a story told by fishermen and forgotten by time. What they found beneath the waves. It took years to uncover even a fraction of what lay below. The divers worked slowly, sometimes blind, sometimes by touch alone. Visibility was poor, the sediment was thick, and every movement stirred clouds of history. But piece by piece, the city returned. A statue's face, still serene after centuries in salt. A gold-plated tablet bearing the names of forgotten kings. Ceramic jars sealed with wax, their contents still intact. A temple doorway, half buried in silt, still facing east. Then came the ships. Dozens of them, wooden hulls preserved by mud and lack of oxygen. Egyptian designs, Greek construction. Some used for trade, others for ritual. One still held its cargo. Baskets of coins, sealed amphorae, ivory combs. But the most striking discoveries weren't objects. They were arrangements. Stones set in perfect lines, like streets still waiting for footsteps. Anchors clustered together near old docks, where sailors once tied their ropes. Altars standing silently in the dark, where offerings had long since dissolved. This wasn't debris. It was a city, intact beneath the waves. Not destroyed by conquest, not burned or looted, just thoughtful forgotten. And now, slowly, it was being remembered. The Forgotten Gate to Egypt. Before Cairo, before Alexandria, Heracleion was the way in. It was the first thing foreign eyes saw when they came to Egypt by sea. Not pyramids, not desert, but a city floating at the edge of the Nile Delta, half land, half water, all wonder. This was Egypt's front door. Long before customs and passports, this is where traders checked in, where taxes were paid, where offerings were made, not just to pharaohs, but to gods. Inscriptions found beneath the seabed tell us that Heracleion was more than a port. It was sacred. Before any goods could enter Egypt, rituals had to be performed here. Sacrifices made, declarations read aloud by priests. Even pharaohs, before they could be crowned in Thebes, had to first receive approval at the Temple of Amun in Heracleion. This wasn't just about religion, it was control. By making Heracleion the gate, Egypt controlled who entered and how. Merchants couldn't bypass it, kings couldn't ignore it. Every coin, every word, every prayer passed through this place. It was a checkpoint of civilization. And for nearly 1,000 years, it held that role. Then it disappeared, and with it, a whole chapter of Egyptian history sank beneath the sea. Why it vanished from memory. You'd think a city this important wouldn't be forgotten. You'd think there would be records, statues, songs. But there aren't. Because history doesn't just disappear in disaster. Sometimes it fades, because people let it. After Heracleion sank, no one rebuilt it. No one came to reclaim the land. They moved on to Alexandria, built just a few miles away. Alexandria had what Heracleion never did: Greek influence, Roman funding, a lighthouse, a library. It became the new jewel of the Mediterranean. And Heracleion became old news, a cautionary tale, a name whispered in ports and temples, then not whispered at all. Even its very name was confused. Some called it Thonis, others Heracleion. Some thought they were two different cities. Some thought it never existed at all. By the time scholars began writing about Egypt centuries later, Heracleion was already gone from the maps and from the memory. And so, for nearly 1,200 years, the sea held its silence, and the world never asked what it was hiding, until a diver reached out his hand and touched the past. Legacy beneath the sea. Heracleion was never meant to be lost. It was powerful, it was sacred, it was essential. But the sea doesn't care about importance. And memory doesn't always follow stone. For centuries, no one asked what had happened to Egypt's lost harbor. No one thought to look beneath the tides. And maybe that says something about us. Because sometimes the things we lose aren't taken from us, we just stop holding on. And yet, it waited. 10 meters under mud and salt, statues waited. Temples waited. A whole civilization, quiet, patient, waited. Not for glory, not for revenge, just to be remembered. And now it is. Not fully, not yet, but piece by piece, diver by diver, we are remembering. And maybe that's the real legacy Heracleion leaves behind. That even after 1,000 years under the sea, a city can rise again, if someone is willing to look.